Chapter 1, Segment 2, Biological Mechanisms Underlie All Behavior. So in order for scientists to understand the underlying mechanisms of behavior, they must regard the organism as a machine. One of the major aims in behavioral neuroscience is to examine body mechanisms that make particular behaviors possible. An example of this would be the question, what parts of the nervous system are involved in the process of the sequence of electrical and biochemical processes that occur when we learn and retrieve it from our memory. So research can be applied to human problems. So for example, the study of memory disorders in humans has pushed scientists to extend our knowledge of the brain regions involved in different kinds of memory in order to solve this problem. There are three approaches that relate brain and behavior. The first is somatic intervention, which is an approach to finding relations between body variables and behavior variables that involves manipulating body structure or function and looking for results in changes in behavior. There are two types of variables, the first being an independent variable, which is the factor that is manipulated in an experiment, and a dependent variable, which is the factor in an experiment that is used to measure or monitor a change in response to the manipulation of the independent variable. So an example of a somatic intervention would be administering a hormone, which would be our independent variable, and seeing the effect that that has on the strength of mating behavior in individuals, and this would be our dependent variable. So the second approach is behavioral intervention, which is an approach to finding relations between body variables and behavioral variables that involves intervening in the behavior of an organism and looking for results in changes in body structure or function. So an example of this would be presenting a visual stimulus, which is our independent variable, and this will cause a change in electrical activity of the brain, which is a dependent variable. The third approach is correlation, which is the covariation of two measures. This consists of finding the extent to which a given body measure varies within a given behavioral measure. So for example, does brain size have a correlation with learning scores? Correlation, however, does not reveal its direction. So in other words, it does not reveal which variable is independent and which is dependent in an experiment. The relations between brain and behavior are reciprocal, meaning that each affects the other in an ongoing cycle of bodily and behavioral interactions. So neuroplasticity, also called neural plasticity, is the ability of the nervous system to change in response to experience or the environment. So researchers have found that almost in all animals, experience can affect the number or size of neurons or the number or size of connections between these neurons. So a major consequence of the plasticity of the human brain is that other individuals can affect the physical structure of our brain. So for example, there are different social influence experiments and young male rat experiments that were conducted by scientists which show that if they're in a social situation as compared to being isolated, that their plasticity of their brain would be different and some areas would be larger than others. And lastly, behavioral neuroscientists use several levels of analysis. The first one being reductionism, which is the scientific strategy of breaking a system down into increasingly smaller parts in order to understand it. And a level of analysis is the scope of experimental approaches. So for example, a scientist may try to understand behavior by monitoring molecules, nerve cells, brain regions, or social environments, or some combination of these levels of analysis.